The Toronto Maple Leafs looked to be in complete shambles. Late in the second period of Game 4 between Toronto and Boston, William Nylander can be seen mouthing this.
Wasted energy, but it's a reality, and that's how you have to channel these moments. You know, you can hear almost word for word for Nylander.
Emotions were high and the team was shaken up, but this looked like it was a long time coming for this particular trio. Mitch Marner is known to show his emotions, and many Leafs fans believe that he should put more focus on showing the same skills on the ice in the playoffs that he does in the regular season. And Nylander seemed to agree, making his annoyance be known. Despite Nylander backtracking, saying, quote, "We're not yelling at each other because we hate each other," this moment inspired me to revisit a topic we've previously discussed: NHL teammates that hated each other. And speaking of teams currently in turmoil, two teammates on the Winnipeg Jets despised each other. The saying, "Don't judge a book by its cover," is a perfect way to describe forward Evander Kane and defenseman Dustin Byfuglien's relationship during their time in Winnipeg. As during interviews and in videos posted online, you'd never assume that anything was going on between the two. They'd use those laughs and smiles as a facade, and they were almost successful. I say almost because news got out about these two's hatred for one another after Kane would get scratched in a game versus Vancouver for violating dress code. This story's been told countless times by countless others, so I wanted to let the footage tell the story. Basically, the rumor goes that Kane would show up to a team meeting wearing a tracksuit rather than a suit, breaking a rule followed by the entire team. Enraged by this, Byfuglien would decide to make an example out of Evander by throwing said tracksuit into the team's shower. 5 days after this incident, Kane would get traded to Buffalo. There's a lot to unpack with this situation that rarely gets addressed. This is where the clips come in. CBC News would interview Byfuglien about this incident taking place, and he would respond with this.
You know, obviously not the ideal spot I want to be in right now, but we're a team, and you know, needed a guy to fill that spot, so you know, I'm the lucky guy.
5 years after the tracksuit moment, Christine Lay from Fair Game would interview Kane about said incident, and in it, he confirms that it was the reason why he got traded, but that the story is fabricated.
That was a made-up word.
Okay.
To clear the air. There was no tracksuit. I was wearing clothes that didn't look like this.
Okay, you weren't wearing a
nice pair of jeans, I was wearing nice shoes, I was wearing a nice jacket.
Okay.
It wasn't a tracksuit.
Many believe Kane is simply making things up as he goes, as there's times throughout the interview where he looks like he's thinking about what to say, but nevertheless, both sides did end up eventually opening up about it. However, this story takes yet another turn, as a Yahoo Sports article from 2015 would reveal this. This photo would get dropped 5 days after Kane's trade to Buffalo. The photographer, Trevor Hagan, would state that this photo was actually taken back in 2014 in a game versus the Islanders. Kane was injured and was congratulating rookie goaltender Michael Hutchinson on his big win. He'd fist bump his teammates until he got to Dustin, when after he'd pretend Kane wasn't there, Kane would give him a quote, playful shove, in which Byfuglien would respond with, well, an unkind gesture. Hagan states it was all in good spirits, but many took it as photographic proof that Kane was not well liked in the locker room. There was rumors he also punched teammate Blake Wheeler, and Kane would state that the team never had his back and instead felt that they traded away their problem. And maybe they did, as Kane also lands another spot in this video as he'd fight another teammate, this time Justin Faulk, in a team practice back in 2018. Faulk was normally a quiet guy, a depth defenseman who rarely slotted into games, but supposedly Kane was upset that Faulk wasn't keeping his stick down, and the two would have to be separated after they began to shove one another. Kane stated in an interview that he didn't think it was that big of a deal.
I really don't think it's that big of a deal, as you guys are maybe making it out to be.
But when Faulk was asked if he would talk to Kane about said incident, he responded with this.
No, I just got off the ice, and you guys saw I just got into my gear here. So, to be quite honest, I have an appointment at the library to read to a couple kids here in a half hour, so I kind of got to get it going.
Because of these incidents and more, Kane began to be known league-wide as a locker room cancer. He's been involved in so much controversy, both on and off the ice, that there's an entire section on his Wikipedia page dedicated to his controversies and incidents. Now a member of the Edmonton Oilers, Kane's still a solid top 6 contributor, but continues to be involved in headlines, as the reason he was even picked up by Edmonton was thanks to San Jose cutting him due to violating both NHL and AHL COVID protocols. Now, what could be worse than fighting your teammates? How about sleeping with their wives? Well, that's exactly what would end up happening during the 1991 season when Gary Leman would decide to form some chemistry with another Iafrate. Al Iafrate was arguably Toronto's best defenseman since Borja Salming, so it came as sort of a shock when he would get dealt away back in 1991, seemingly out of nowhere. Some fans knew that the two weren't too fond of one another, but when the rumors got out, it all made sense. There have been 3 iterations of this story, all being retold with an additional element. The universally accepted one is the obvious. Al would catch his wife Melissa sleeping with Gary Leman, and the tension between the two became so tense that it later resulted in both getting traded away. Toronto would actually trade Iafrate first, surprisingly, the victim of this incident, as Leman was coming off a 50-goal season. The other 2 iterations of this story includes a rumor that Al hired teammate John Kordic to sucker punch Leman, which is the reason why he had to miss time during the 1991 season, and that Melissa actually would sleep with an additional unnamed teammate as well as Leman. I've heard the Kordic part get mentioned a handful of times, however there isn't really a way to prove it happened other than the fact that Leman did end up missing games during that season. Regardless, Toronto was still able to capitalize on this situation somehow, as they would ship Leman off to Calgary, where in return they get Doug Gilmour, who became a Leafs icon and would help propel the team into title contention.
What a guy, the best hockey player in the world today, Dougie Gilmour, and don't you forget it, from Kingston, Ontario. Isn't he lovely? I love this guy. I love him. All right.
Saku Koivu is one of the most respected players in NHL history, as the former Habs captain was nothing but class, so it comes as a shock to see that he even had beef with a former teammate to begin with. The Habs during the 03-04 season looked to be in a fantastic scenario at the center position. Koivu, Mike Ribeiro, and a 22-year-old Thomas Plekanec would be the team's first, second, and third line centers, and their core looked poised for success. However, Ribeiro, who was known to possess a quote, me first attitude, believed that he should be playing the role of the number 1 center and not Koivu. Things would finally boil over between the two during a morning skate during February of that year, when the two would drop the gloves and lash their feelings out at one another. Ribeiro would get interviewed by the media shortly after and tried to play it off as teammates just trying to make each other better, but the damage that fight caused in the locker room was monumental. It was rumored that sides would begin to form because of the feud, which in turn caused a divide and became a distraction. 3 years after the incident, Ribeiro would state to the media that he never felt welcomed by the team and felt as if Koivu never respected him. Ribeiro would remain a solid contributor after getting dealt away to Dallas, and Koivu would remain one of the most beloved players in franchise history. But many are left to wonder what Montreal could have been if these two were just able to get along. The final feud between former teammates is one that would actually end up damaging an extremely close friendship. Slava Fetisov and Alexei Kasatonov, during their time in Russia, considered themselves as brothers. Fetisov would mention in the film Red Army that the two were so close that they would be roommates, that he considered him as a younger brother, that his mother would cook for Alexei, and that even his grandpa was also considered a grandpa figure for Alexei. The two were also partners on the blue line and knew each other like a book. They were so in sync that when Kasatonov would go into the zone, Fetisov would trail back and vice versa. Their chemistry on and off the ice was obvious, and the Devils would try and capitalize on the two's success. New Jersey would draft Fetisov 145th overall in the 1983 draft after he would re-enter due to his initial request to play getting denied by the USSR. Fast forward to the 1989-90 season, and at the age of 31, Fetisov again again expressed interest in playing in the NHL, and this time refused to be denied. With help from the Glass Knot policy, Fetisov would play a major role in allowing him and 8 other USSR players to break the Iron Curtain and play in the NHL. This is where things get interesting. The Devils, because of this, would also bring over longtime buddy Katanov. However, when being asked about how he felt about this move, he would respond to the media saying, quote, "I don't happy." This came as a shock to many, but as it turned out, Fetisov would reveal that not only was Katanov upset that he tried to defect back in 1983, but that he would also agree and side with the government who were attempting to bury Fetisov in the media for leaving the Union. Slava would state, quote, "It's not right that he was against me coming here and now also wants to follow." His teammate Brendan Shanahan, who knows a thing or two about making a fellow teammate mad, mentioned that the two wouldn't speak to one another and would go as far as refusing to take the same cab as one another. This goal call from Gary Thorne perfectly describes their situation.
Looking, dropped it, Katanov, the shot, score! Alexei Katanov gets the high five from Slava. They don't talk, but they sure as heck play well together.
What Thorne said was 100% true. Even though they hated each other, they were still able to put it aside on the ice and showed that the chemistry was still there. Besides the original statements from Slava, the two surprisingly handled the situation with class. No bickering back and forth, no fights in practice, no wars in the media. They simply went through the motions. From what I saw in that same Red Army film, Fetisov said nothing bad about Alexei. He simply remembered the good times and talked highly about him. Their friendship may have died, and they may have hated each other, but the respect that they had for one another on the ice is still able to forever live on.